drama to modern-day vibes, Rewind and Unwind with Hoda and Rayhan brings you the best stories from the past in a fresh way.
Hello, I'm Hoda.
And I am Rayhan.
We are both students in Sister Sada's history class, which makes us qualified enough.
While you were eating your Captain Crunch or your Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal this morning, you probably wondered, how did the regional differences between African American societies in the 18th century affect how they develop today? Well, we are here to put your minds at ease and give you the answer.
Today we will be explaining African Americans' development from the 18th century all the way to present time period, which is the 21st century.
We will then compare and contrast the Northern African Americans with the Southern African Americans in both the 21st and 18th century, as well as other important periods of time in the middle, in order to see how the development of their societies in the 18th century affected how African Americans develop today.
In the 18th century, there were many different regions that African Americans were split up into, like the Chesapeake, Georgia and South Carolina, and the North. But for the sake of simplicity, we will just be doing the North and South generally.
In the 18th century, African Americans in the North were more educated than those in the South, due to educational opportunities given to them, which carries on till today due to the same opportunity differences.
Brown versus the Board of Education was the case to desegregate schools in the South. Even after this decision, the South was still hesitant about making schools not segregated. The North, however, was one step ahead of the game and was already desegregated, so naturally Black Americans in the North had better access to education.
Additionally, a study conducted in the South, specifically New Orleans, called The Educational Status of African American Males in the 21st Century, which was between 1990s and 2000, shows a growing educational disparity between African American women and men in all higher education institutions, but also in public and private historical Black colleges and universities in the country.
We could not find any studies showing that the disparities still exist in 2024. The reason that the North might still be seen as more educated could be due to the presence of the Ivy Leagues that are mainly in the Northeast.
Not only did the North have more educational opportunities, they also had jobs. Even when the North had slaves, the slaves were trained in more fields than just agriculture.
An article from the Medford Historical Society and Museum states, from the 17th century onward, slaves in the North could be found in almost every field of Northern economic life. They worked as carpenters, shipwrights, sailmakers, printers, tailors, etc. Many became so talented in the crafts that the free white workers lost their jobs to them.
In the 20th century, there was something called the Great Migration, where seeking better economic and social opportunities for themselves and their children, over 7 million African Americans left the South between 1950 and 1970.
Before this point, even though the 13th Amendment allowed Black people to migrate, many didn't migrate to the North due to farm tenacity arrangements, poverty, high levels of illiteracy, and scarce opportunities in the North.
In the 18th century, African Americans in the North were more successful in politics and income due to more education and job opportunities in their region. This carries on till today due to the same opportunity differences. Almost all of the most legendary Black entrepreneurs were from northern states. However, while the North dominates jobs and incomes, more influential politicians came from the South.
After the Civil War, during the Reconstruction era, African Americans were fighting for their equal rights because they were now officially citizens of the United States. During this period of their advocating, there were almost 2,000 African Americans who took office from all over the South and held positions at local, state, and federal levels.
This states, Black lawmakers made up majority of delegates in the 1868 South Carolina Constitutional Convention, which greenlit tax-funded public schools. Similarly, half of the delegates were Black at the Louisiana Constitutional Convention, which wrote integrated public schools into the new Constitution.
We can see in the South, as soon as African Americans could hold office, they did, and a lot of them. In the North, however, some African Americans were running for positions, but not as much as in the South.
In this map, we can see how most of the southern states, southern meaning 18th century southern states like Mississippi, Alabama, have mostly Black legislators, but in the North, there were much fewer.
In the South, African Americans were closer due to slavery, so they were able to create communities and cultures with each other. In the North, Black people were farther apart, so they didn't have the opportunities to create such communities. These differences still carry on till today. The South has a stronger sense of Black culture connected to music and religion.
An article from Vinyl Revenue states that the African Americans in the South were responsible for most genres such as jazz, blues, ragtime, Dixieland, jazz fusion, free jazz, country music, etc., etc.
A study from Pew Research Center states, worship habits among Black Christians in the South, where African American churches date back to the 1700s, have long differed from practices of Black Americans in other parts of the United States. To this day, Black Southerners are more likely to attend Black congregations than any other region in America. The Black South also has the highest number of Christians. About 2/3 of the Black South says that religion is very important to them. Lastly, the Pew Research Center found that Black Southerners are more likely to pray daily as compared to other Black Americans.
Today, we were able to prove our thesis that regional differences still affect African Americans to this day. We also had our thesis disproven in some ways. More research will be needed to create a more conclusive answer to our question.
We were able to prove that Northern Black people had more opportunities in jobs and education, which still carries on till the 21st century. However, whether or not disparities in education still exist in 2024 still needs further research.
There is also evidence to suggest that Southern Black people are more involved in politics despite educational disparities. We were able to conclude that Northern Black people were making more money, but further research is needed to prove that because of opportunities and not because it generally costs more to live in the North. Lastly, the South still has a stronger sense of culture than the North, which carried on from the 18th century.
Today, we were able to prove our thesis that regional differences still affect African Americans to this day. But we also had our thesis disproven in some ways. More research will be needed to create a more conclusive answer to our question.
Hopefully with this research, people will be able to see how slavery still affects Black people in the South, so they will not just see it as a thing of the past.
Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.